I don't know exactly how unpopular this is, but I think people vastly overrate the quality of his shows. Aside from Danny Phantom, what has this man really done? Tough Puppy was hit and miss, Bunsen is a Beast was annoying and cliched, and that Dougal movie was an absolute flop. And I hate to tell you guys, but even though I've only reviewed 3 seasons of The Fairly OddParents, I'm only expecting maybe 1 or 2 good seasons out of the rest of the show at most. Maybe we treat this guy as more influential than he actually is because The Fairly OddParents went on for so long, and Danny Phantom was seen as really good, but honestly, it's amazing how his entire reputation was able to ride off of those 2 shows alone, and the only good parts of both, since neither were perfect, or even close really. Or we forget everything else he's done because his worst works fell into obscurity and never became infamously bad. Remember guys, this is the man who failed to make Jerry Trainor funny. If what I've said before meant nothing, at least take that away from this video. By the time Tough Puppy came out, Butch Hartman was so washed that he couldn't make Jerry Trainor funny. Oh, and by the way, since I know this will be controversial, yes I did say that I only expect about 1 more good season out of The Fairly OddParents. Obviously I'm going to still keep making those videos because they're fun to do, but realistically the worst the show has to offer is still ahead of me. I've technically already reviewed what many fans consider to be the good seasons, and I didn't even think 2 of the 3 of them were good. So yeah, keep this in mind when you talk about Butch Hartman's reputation, if the awful person he is behind the scenes didn't already do that for you. Before you comment, no, Regular Show is not a bad show. It's in my top 10 in fact. That may be surprising, but when you've been watching as many cartoons as I have for as long as I have, you start to appreciate the cleverness of Regular Show a lot more. And I honestly have to say, the worst part of Regular Show to me is Margaret. She's a boring character with no personality besides being a girl, and that Mordecai thinks she's attractive, but unfortunately, that attractiveness can't really be conveyed to the audience because she's a literal animal. And because she's the love interest, a lot of her episodes tend to take the romance angle, which is something I don't tend to be a fan of a lot of the time. I'm 19 years old, and I've never had a girlfriend, and I've never really had a crush either. So when I see someone failing at both of those things like Mordecai often does, it comes off as more cringy than funny, which is why Do Me a Solid, for example, is one of Regular Show's worst episodes, because it's not his fault. In fact, I'm having a hard time coming up with an episode Margaret had a major role in that didn't suffer because of it, which is really sad for a show I'm a big fan of and have a lot of respect for. I'm making sure to word myself very carefully with this one. I didn't say got worse or got bad, and I'm also not implying that it shouldn't have been picked up to begin with. Because in all honesty, Phineas and Ferb is probably the best animated franchise owned by Disney. No, you didn't hear me stutter. I really do think that. But let's get back to the opinion at hand. Yes, Phineas and Ferb, I think, did go on for way too long. For example, let's look at Phineas and Ferb's most obvious analog in animation. Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? You might be surprised, but the original run of Scooby-Doo only lasted from 1969 to 1970. But obviously, it's been rebooted many times, even just counting the ones before 2000, and there's still a lot. But this was the model Phineas and Ferb should have followed, as it became painfully obvious early on that Phineas and Ferb was a very popular show. Just give Phineas and Ferb a 2-season run originally and then have it renewed after 3 or 4 year breaks between each subsequent season. Otherwise, how formulaic the show is tends to fatigue your audience, and this can happen no matter how good the show is. I started keeping up around the time I hit middle school, and I imagine I would have seen every episode upon first airing if they followed my proposed model. But the past is the past, and because of that, Phineas and Ferb got stale before it had any right to. Sure, in the later episodes they'd break the formula more and experiment with different concepts, but they still managed to run out of steam after 8 years. This seems like a weird thing to be talking about in a video like this, but it is more than tangentially related, so I'm keeping it in. For those that don't know, Digiview Productions, later renamed to Digiview Entertainment because they didn't actually produce anything, was a company that would sell DVDs containing content in the public domain. Most notable is their cartoon DVDs, which I still have a few of. But let's say they survived the lawsuit. Does that mean they'd still be making DVDs today? No, it doesn't. If that lawsuit didn't kill them, it's very likely something else would have. Like, for example, the optics of selling one of the censored 11 on a DVD marketed towards children and not giving any indication that's what you were doing, yeah, that's a very bad decision, but what's worse is that unless you happen to know the titles of these banned cartoon shorts, you'd have no idea you were doing this until you popped the DVD in for your 6-year-old to watch while you put them in front of a screen to neglect them. These cartoons might not be a big deal to you and me, but not thinking through optics like this is just setting yourself up for a big failure down the line. And this is without even considering the decline of the DVD business lately. The only people that buy them anymore are collectors like myself, and you can't sell something only marketed towards general audiences like this to a collectors only market and expect to make money. Digiview should have thanked this lawsuit for killing them before something else did. At least this way they went out with a win. By now, you all know my opinions on every episode of this show, and I have to say, yes, the first 3 seasons are the best of the show. The writing room back then had a chemistry that couldn't really be duplicated given the circumstances of the show's production later on. But does that mean everything the new staffs made was garbage? It absolutely does not mean that. I often see people reminiscing about this show online, and the public perception in the eyes of the fans is night and day from the casual viewer. These are because people you often see in the comments talking about how new SpongeBob is trash very likely haven't seen an episode past the age of 10. Or, my favorite, I wish this show would go back to the classic era. Never mind the fact that these people can never seem to give a straight answer when you ask them what the classic era was. I don't know about you, but I'd never be willing to have an opinion on a decade and a half of material I'd never seen. It's easy to hate on the new episodes and the lazy opinion to have when you want to be blinded by nostalgia. Giving things a fair shot apparently takes effort that these people aren't willing to give. After all, the episodes that came out when this sentiment became common are the ones seen as actually bad by the fanbase, and most fans seem to actually like the post-season 9 episodes. I obviously disagree with this, but at least I can say I watched enough to properly judge without giving sweeping generalizations. You and I both probably agree that the first 3 seasons of SpongeBob are the best the show has to offer, but I'm not going to pretend that everything outside of that is bad, and it would be dishonest for me to do that if I hadn't seen most of it. You'll never see me have an opinion because it's the quote-unquote cool one to have. And with that, thanks for watching, and have a good one.